Thank you for joining us again tonight. We're going to be talking about Genesis 22. And this is a very important chapter because in this chapter you'll be able to see Jesus and the crucifixion and the resurrection and everything that we said in the Bible points directly at Jesus Christ. So let's get into Genesis 22 and verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee to the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering unto one of the mountains, upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee. And Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his ass, took two of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went to the place of which God had told him. Then on the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. To set the stage for what's going on here, Abraham is now, after the episode with Abimelech and the covenant that Abimelech and Abraham made, Abraham now it's about 10 years down the road. Isaac is now a young man or perhaps a teenager. And everything had been going well for 10 years. Abraham had lived in peace with his neighbors. He had prospered there at Beersheba in that area. Everything was going good. And then all at once God speaks to Abraham and he says, Take thou thy son, thy only son that thou lovest, and offer him as a burnt offering or a burnt sacrifice where I'm going to show you. Can you imagine, after all those years, watching your promised child grow up with you, the amount of love that Abraham had for his father? And now Abraham is being asked to sacrifice him, basically to kill him. Now, it says that God did tempt Abraham. Well, that word tempt in Hebrew could also mean try or trial, not necessarily a temptation. So that begs the question of what's a temptation versus what is a trial. And a temptation stems from the desires that are within you to drag you to fulfill the lust of those desires or the lust of the flesh. That is a temptation. The evil one, the devil, tempts us all the times with desires that are pleasing to ourselves. But a trial is something that arises externally, and it's for a specific purpose. Notice he said, Take thy son, thy only son, who thou lovest. Well, God so loved the world that he gave his only beloved son, Jesus Christ. And all these things, doesn't it remind you of Christ? Abraham loved his son. God loved his son. Abraham's son was the promised one. Jesus was the one promised from the garden itself. He said, Go to the land of Moriah. Moriah is Jerusalem. Moriah is where Christ was offered. Moriah is actually the Temple Mount, where literally when David came along 1,000 years from the time of Abraham, and he built the temple, the millions of sacrifices that were offered right there in that very spot where God asked Abraham to offer his son Isaac. It is the Dome of the Rock, where the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem is now. And that rock you can go to and visit and walk around. It's the very rock that 4,000 years ago God asked Abraham to lay his Isaac down on and to offer him as a sacrifice. And the word said that Abraham rose up early in the morning, took two of his young men with him, Isaac his son, clave the wood of the burnt offering, rose up and went to the place where God had told him. And then on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place. Abraham's faith was so strong that when God asked him to offer his son as a burnt offering, a burnt sacrifice, in Abraham's mind, Isaac was as good as dead at that moment. And then it says, after 3 days of travel, they came to the place. And that place wasn't where he was going to kill his son. His son was already dead in his own eyes. It's where he was going to get resurrected. Hebrews 11:17 says, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. And then he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence he also received him in a figure. Let me ask you tonight, do you know anybody else that was raised on the third day?